Hi friends, welcome back to my little corner of the internet. Grab your tea, get cozy, because today we are diving into my May reading journal setup. This is going to be a little bit of a long video. We got a lot to get through, including a little unboxing I'm excited to share with you, plus 8 books that I read this month. But I will set up chapters so you can skip to whichever section of the video you prefer. Okay, so before we get into May, let's catch up on my yearly spreads. First up is always my shelfie spread, where I color in every book I read that month. Each month gets its own Tombow shade, just so I can glance at the shelf and instantly know who showed up when. May's color is N60, and it's like a light grayish blue color. The 8 books that I read for May brought my total up to 36 for the year. So we get to move into the next page of the Dutch door that I designed for my shelfie. This is why I love Dutch doors, because you only have to decorate the edges once and then everything flows through. The next spread is my Goodreads goal spread. I'm aiming for 54 books this year with a stretch goal of 100. And same deal here, I colored in all 8 May reads in the same N60 shade. Next up is my A to Z or alphabet challenge, and I knocked out 2 new letters this month. That was letter G for the book Game On and letter U for the book The Unicorn Hunters. Next up is my book bingo, and I'm excited to say that I hit bingo this month. So I was able to fill in 3 new prompts. That was B4. The prompt is Book Talk Made Me Do It, and the book that I read for that prompt was Game On. The second prompt was N1, a book that I've owned for over 2 years, and the book that I read for that prompt was The Adventures of Amina Sirafi. And lastly, G3, read a book that takes place at sea, and for that one I read Sea of Charms. Next up is my Read the Rainbow challenge, and I did read 1 book that had the color green in its cover, so that means I only need 2 more books, 1 for pink and 1 for yellow, and then I'll be done with this challenge. Next up is my Buzzword Readathon, and I managed to hit 1 more prompt in the cover challenge, and that was reflection. I didn't do any new prompts for the actual Buzzword Readathon though. My series tracker had some fun updates. I started a new series with The Adventures of Amina Sirafi, and I also continued 2 series I'm already in the middle of, finishing book 3 of The Spell Shop and book 3 of Into the Darkness. 3 of the books that I read, I own a physical copy of, so I was excited to mark those off the list. I did have 1 book to add to the Hall of Fame, but I forgot to print the cover, so I'm gonna do that off camera. So that was all in terms of my annual updates. The next one is a little unboxing that my friends at the Washi Tape Shop sent me, so I'm very excited to share with you what I got. First up is the Garden Sprout white PET tape, and it's just so dreamy. All the soft watercolor pinks, mint greens, and butter yellows with these crisp black outlines. It really looks like a fresh spring garden got pressed into a tape. The next one is the Petal Post white tape, and this one was basically made for me. Open journals and classic books surrounded by little spring bouquets and butterflies. A bookish girl's dream. Then there's Zephyr's Bloom, which has this gorgeous hand-drawn rustic wildflower and butterfly look. It comes in both washi and PET finishes, so you can go soft and textured or bright and layered depending on your mood. Clover Haze is next, and honestly this one just feels like a hug. Little farmer's trousers and sun hats tucked into the greenery. It's a very slow Sunday morning kind of energy. Next, we've got Nostalgic Moments, which has the softest watercolor scenes about just being home and loving your own company. And I'll be using this one in my May cover page, so you'll see it in just a second. I really like this one. And last but absolutely not least, Rose Noir in the Gilded Finish. This is my all-time favorite PET tape, and I was almost out of it, so they sent me a fresh roll, and I may have done a little happy dance when I saw this one. So thank you so much, the Washi Tape Shop. I will link everything below, and you can use code Psychonaut10 for 10% off if you want to grab any of these for yourself. Okay, tape excitement aside, let's get into May. So my main inspiration this month came straight from the Nostalgic Moments tape I just showed you. The girls on the tape are just so soft and cozy, and I knew the second I saw them that they had to be the star of the spread. I pulled a few of them out and played around with where I wanted them to be in the page. Now I knew I wanted to build some kind of a border around them, and I pulled this gorgeous bookish washi tape from Archer and Olive. It's from their Enchanted Chapters Spring collection, which actually launched earlier this year, and this might be one of my favorite collections I've ever put out. Also, the colors lined up perfectly with the Nostalgic Moments girls that it almost felt like they were made for each other. I'll be honest, I hadn't bought any washi tape from Archer and Olive in a very long time because I didn't really have a good experience with their washi tapes when they first were released a few years back, and so it just kind of turned me off from the brand. But these ones are actually pretty reasonable, and I mean, they actually do stick, because that was my main issue with their previous washi tape. It never actually stuck anywhere. It would just keep peeling off on your tape and your page, so it just sucked. But this ones actually do stick, which is good. From the Nostalgic Moments pet tape, I also really love these little cats that were there. And also they had a few little designs here and there, like frames and pictures and books and stuff, so I just spread them all over the spread. Then for my title, I pulled out my alphabet PET tape from Paperminty Studio, and I just spelled out May right at the top. This pet tape comes in so many different colors, so I just picked some that fit the rest of the colors. I also recently picked up these Pentel brush pens, and I used the green one to hand letter books read right under the title. And this was actually one of the first time I've used these pens in my journal, and I'm so happy with how the lettering turned out. I think these are going to be a lot more spreads from now on. They are pretty easy to control, which I feel like I do have some issues sometimes depending on the brush pen that I'm using about controlling, but these ones were pretty easy and straightforward to use, so if you are learning lettering or anything like that, I would recommend them. So in terms of the layout, I split the page into a few sections. So one big section is just a simple list of all of the books that I read this month, and then I've got 3 more sections that break down my stats for May. The first stats section is all about the authors, and this month, every single book I read, all 8 of them, were written by female authors. And I mean, there is no surprise there, I do read a lot of female authors. But in terms of where they're from, 7 of them were based in the US and only 1 author is from South Korea. So I feel like I didn't really try very hard to differentiate my reads this month. Next section is my bookish stats, and this is where I track genre, age category, fiction versus nonfiction, format, and any LGBTQ+ representation. So genre-wise, May was a really nice mix. I read 2 fantasy books, 3 historical fiction, 1 dark romance, 1 historical fantasy, and 1 literary fiction. And that's a pretty well-rounded month for me, I would say. Every single book I read in May was also adult fiction. And 2 out of my 8 reads had LGBTQ+ representation. Format-wise, I was definitely in my audiobook era this month. 4 of my 8 books were audio, 3 were ebooks, and just 1 was physical. And then the last section is my star rating for the month, and overall I'd say May was a solid reading month. I had 1 5-star read, which is always a dream. 3 were 4-star reads, 3 3-star reads, and just 1 2-star that didn't quite land for me. And this is very rare. I hardly give books below 3 stars, so I was pretty disappointed with this one. I was having a hard time finding some Tobo colors that fit the rest of the color scheme because the spread is a little bit moody and dark, and so I felt like if I used dark colors, they wouldn't show the numbers beneath it. And so I decided to stick with just different shades of brown for now, and I do like how it all came together in the end. And this was my cover page for the month of May. I started the month really strong with Sea of Charms by Sarah Beth Durst. I loved and adored this book so much, so I feel like anything else that I read afterwards just could not live up to this hype. Thank you so much to Macmillan Audio for the ALC. Sea of Charms is the 3rd book in the Spell Shop series. While it can be read as a standalone, I would highly recommend reading the other books because this is one of my all-time favorite series, I would say. Especially if you love cozy fantasy, Sarah Beth Durst is literally the queen of cozy fantasy. Sea of Charms follows Marion, a supply runner sailing island to island, delivering basically whatever anyone will pay her to carry. Letters, flour, the occasional enchanted lemur, you name it. Her one constant companion is Perry, a sea serpent she rescued from a fisher folk's net. And honestly, Perry alone is worth the read. When Marion arrives in the city of Elysium and finds it in flames with an entire empire collapsed overnight, she does the only thing she knows how to do. She keeps moving. This time, she's ferrying refugees to safety. And one of them is Dax, a composer who point-blank refuses to leave his instruments behind. Watching Mary's exasperation with him slowly melt into something more was one of my favorite parts of the whole book. This is classic Sarah Beth Durst, cozy fantasy that wraps around you like a warm hug and just doesn't let go. The island hopping structure makes it feel so immersive, like you're right there on the boat with Marion, Dax, Perry, and a sailor shrub named Ree. Yes, a sailor shrub. There are also familiar faces woven throughout that had me wanting to immediately reread the first 2 books. Plus a teaser for book 4 that I'm simply not emotionally prepared for. I experienced this one on audio, and Caitlin Davis is doing the Lord's work as narrator. Every creature, every character, every magical little moment landed with so much warmth and personality. If Sarah Beth Durst writes it, I'm reading it. If you haven't started this series, begin with book 1 and then come find me so we can cry about Perry together. Now in terms of the spread, I designed the boat and the serpent in Canva, and then I just used my Cricut to cut it. And then the washi tape for the sea, that is from Journal Say, and the sky washi tape is from Marigona Soliard. I also felt like the spread needed some more gold and like shininess, so I had these butterfly stickers from Archer and Olive. I've had them for years at this point, I never used them, and so I figured this would make a good spread for it. And I really love how this page came together in the end. The next book I read is A Founding Mother, a novel of Abigail Adams by Stephanie Dray and Laura Camoy. Big thank you to William Morrow for the ARC and to Harper Audio for the ALC. I actually went back and forth between the audiobook and the ebook for this one, which ended up being a great way to experience it. This is a historical fiction book about Abigail Adams. She's one of those historical figures you feel like you almost know but never quite fully. This book changed that completely. Dray and Camoy bring her to life with so much specificity and emotional weight that by the end, I felt like I'd spent 2.5 centuries in her company. And what company! What struck me most wasn't even her famous wit or her political instincts, though both were absolutely on display. It was just the sheer accumulation of everything she carried. While John was away for years at a time, she was running the farm, managing the finances, building a successful mercantile business in the middle of a war, raising their children, and holding it all together with a steadiness the book never lets you take for granted. She lost children. She watched her sons fall into alcoholism. She buried her daughter, and she just kept going. Dray and Camoy are also so good at sitting in the contradictions. Abigail was a staunch abolitionist who was born into a family of enslavers. She urged John to remember the latest and was still routinely overruled by him. She spent decades helping build a nation that wouldn't extend its own founding ideals to women for another 150 years. This book doesn't try to resolve any of that, it just lets it sit there, which is exactly what makes it feel so honest. As a Massachusetts reader myself, the sense of place in this one felt completely authentic. The atmosphere, the texture of daily life, the weight of living through a revolution on home soil. That grounding made the whole thing even more immersive for me. The audiobook was really well done too. The narration suits the sweep of the story, and there's something fitting about hearing Abigail's voice carried out loud like that. My only real critique is that some stretches, particularly the war years and her time as First Lady, felt a little compressed given how much story there was to tell. But that's a small frustration in an otherwise completely absorbing read. If you've ever wanted a fuller picture of the women who shaped the early republic, this is exactly that book. It's also a great read for the 250-year anniversary of the United States of America. Now for this spread, I used this gorgeous washi tape from Leela Journals. Her washi tapes are always so delicate and feminine, and they're just perfect, so I really like working with them. I also used some stickers from this sticker sheet from Sticky Club. I've had that for quite a while, and I just never got around to using it, so I felt like it fit perfectly for this spread. And then I also used a few more florals from this sticker book from Journal Say. And that was my spread for A Founding Mother. The next book I read in May is The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi by Shannon Chakraborty. I have had this book sitting on my shelf for a few years now. A few years. I kept seeing it everywhere, hearing so much hype around it, picking it up, putting it back down, and somehow it just kept getting passed over. It wasn't until my book club finally chose it as our pick that I actually sat down and read it. And well, now I have feelings about how long I waited. There is a very specific kind of joy that comes from a fantasy novel where the hero isn't some young, fresh-faced chosen one. Amina al-Sirafi is a tired, morally complicated woman in her 40s who has done her time and just wants to be left alone. She's a former pirate of considerable legend, a mother, a daughter, and someone who has already had her absolute fill of demons, thank you very much. She has earned her retirement fair and square. And then predictably, infuriatingly, the world comes knocking anyway. Shannon sets all of this up with an opening that hooked me almost immediately. And I want you to know that by the end of the book, I was in tears, full tears. What unfolds between that opening hook and that ending is part heist, part reunion story, and part meditation on what love actually looks like when it ends up shaping an entire life. The plot kicks off when a wealthy noblewoman hires Amina to rescue a kidnapped girl, one connected to someone Amina once loved on her crew. And so Amina does the only thing a self-respecting retired pirate can really do in that situation. She gets the band back together. And honestly, the crew is the absolute heart of this book. Every single member has such a distinct, fully realized personality, and the loyalty they have to one another gives the whole story this found family warmth that had me smiling again and again throughout. Dalila is a particular standout for me. I just loved every scene she was in. And then there's Raksh, who is mysterious and charming and thoroughly, deliciously suspicious the entire time. His dynamic with Amina was one of my favorite threads running through the whole book. I will say, in the interest of being honest with you, the pacing does take a little while to find its footing in the early chapters, but once it locks in, the world that Chakraborty has built absolutely delivers. We're talking giant tentacle scorpions, magical artifacts, bird people, actual demons. It is rich, layered, fully realized fantasy, and you can tell every piece of it was built with real care. But what stuck with me the most is how much this book thinks about gender, about sexuality, about what it means to be an older woman who is still hungry for life, still capable of adventure, still allowed to want things. That's not something fantasy gives us nearly enough of, and this book delivers it generously. Now, I have to talk about the spread that I made for this book because it might honestly be one of my all-time favorite spreads I have ever created. I used this acrylic markers from Grabby, which I actually got for free through TikTok Shop. And I will admit, I went in with pretty low expectations. I did not think they were going to perform this well. But the colors are so vibrant, they don't bleed through the page at all, and honestly, they were perfect for what I wanted to do. I painted a ship with giant tentacles rising up out of the water, and I had no idea what I was doing. I just trusted the process, and I'm obsessed with how it turned out. Truly one of my favorites. After I finished writing the review for this book, I had this empty space right there and I felt like I needed something, so I just created these fake waves and just extended the waterline from the ship. And I feel like it was a great decision on my end because it looks so much better this way. And I just added some highlights to the waves, and I really, really love how this came out. I'm very proud of myself for this one. The next book I read is Game On by Navessa Allen. This is the third book in the Into Darkness series. Although it could be read as a standalone, I read Lights Out, which is the first book in the series, and it was okay. It wasn't my favorite or anything like that. And I kind of skipped the second book in the series, and I don't think I missed much, to be honest, so I feel like any of these books can be read as standalones. Now, this book is going to be a little bit of a hot take, so bear with me. The premise had real potential. We have a brooding, revenge-driven man infiltrating a wealthy family by forcing the daughter to pose as his fake girlfriend. That's a solid setup, right? The plot moved fast enough that I never hit a wall of boredom, but it also never gave me that white-knuckle, hard-in-the-throat tension I was hoping for from a dark romance. And honestly, I'm still not sure what's dark about this dark romance. Someone explain it to me. Now, I will admit I am not the target audience for this book, and that's okay. But even setting my personal taste aside, there were some elements in the book that kind of took over it in a way that pulled focus away from any romantic tension that could have been building. There are some weird kinks in this book, which I'm personally not into, but to each their own. My biggest issue, though, is Tyler. He is not morally gray. He is just rude. There's a real difference between a dark, compelling hero and a man who's simply unpleasant to be around. And Tyler never quite crosses over into the former for me. And then there's Stella, who gets blackmailed and basically just shrugs it off. I needed so much more backbone from her. Her whole characterization leaned really heavily on her chronic illness and her attraction to Tyler, and neither of those things is a personality. I also have to mention the AJ situation because it raised more questions than it answered. If you're going to write a throuple, commit to writing a throuple. Don't introduce a third person into the dynamic and then give him maybe 2 scenes total. It just felt like an afterthought, honestly. But I do have to give credit where credit is due. The one true bright spot of this entire book is Fred the cat. Absolute scene stealer. The best character by far. And honestly, getting little glimpses of the world through Fred's chaotic little cat brain was the highlight of my whole reading experience with this one. Now for this spread, I wanted to stick to the green and black color scheme, and so I used the same grabby markers as before, but in a neon green color and also the black color. And I just basically designed the cover page with the mask, and then I added a little border around it. I wanted to add some green highlights to the black border, so I just dabbled markers and pencils to create some kind of a shading background, I guess. And again, I had no plan going into this. I was just noting down markers with different shades of green, and then I went over it with this pencil, which is like a green color pencil, just to give it a little bit more of a thin shade. and this was my spread for Game On. The next book I read is Song for Another Home by Bora Lee Reed. Thank you so much to Simon & Schuster for the arc. Now, I'll be upfront with you, I really wanted to love this one so badly. And on paper, it had everything. A family torn apart by the Korean War, a desperate trek from Pyongyang to Seoul in the dead of winter, a young man at a struggling orphanage navigating survival and morality. It sounded incredible, and yet it just wasn't my favorite. The novel follows two storylines. In the north, we have teenage Ok-soon and her family, who are forced into an impossible choice when Chinese bombing pushes them to flee Pyongyang without the father and older brother who had already left for the south before the chaos started. Their journey is brutal in the way Korean War displacement was, and once they land in Seoul and start piecing together a new life around a soup house and a found family, there are glimpses of something really worth reading here. In the south, their cousin, Juno, has taken refuge at an orphanage near Jinju, where he earns his place by writing fundraising letters to American benefactors. Letters that are essentially fiction, crafted to make traumatized children seem sympathetic enough to be worth saving. Honestly, his storyline carries the most moral complexity in this entire book. But here's my issue. Neither storyline ever really got under my skin. The characters felt too thinly drawn to carry the weight of everything they were surviving. Ok-soon is devoted and resilient. Juno is thoughtful and conflicted. Chang-ho telegraphs trouble from the moment he shows up. None of them surprised me. None of them made me afraid for them. I just didn't feel much of anything about what happened to either one of them. And I'll admit part of this might be timing. I read this one right after The Young Will Remember, which is another Korean War novel that absolutely wrecked me emotionally, and that made the flatness here even harder to forgive. For a story set against one of history's most devastating and underrepresented wars, this should have wrecked me too, and it just didn't. In terms of this spread, all of the PT tape that I use is from Paperminty Studio, and I really love this release of hers, so I love how the spread came out at the end. The next book I read is The Stargazer of Nantucket by Julie Gerstenblad. Thank you so much to Park Row and Harlequin Audio for the ALC. There is something so irresistible about a ship setting sail for the other side of the world, and this book leans fully into that feeling. Set in 1851, it follows the Starbuck family, Captain Peter, his merchant wife, Nell, and their 18-year-old daughter, Winifred, who absolutely refuses to be left behind on Nantucket when her parents set off on what Peter hopes will be a record-breaking run to San Francisco and then on to Canton, China. So Winifred does the only logical thing a determined 18-year-old can do. She stows away. One of the real strengths of this book is the period detail. I came away knowing so much more than I expected about how clipper ships were provisioned and maintained over months at sea. And somehow, it never once felt like homework. It just wove naturally into the story and grounded the whole adventure in something tactile and real. The stop in Gold Rush era San Francisco was a particular highlight for me. It's buzzing with all that chaotic, electric energy of that exact moment in American history. But where the book really shines is in its portrait of women navigating a world that consistently underestimates them. Nell is such a compelling figure, and that broader theme of female resiliency felt genuinely earned rather than just tacked on. The story also touches on slavery, cross-cultural tensions, and the human cost of ambition, and it manages to do that without ever overwhelming the plot. My main frustration was Winifred herself. For a protagonist who's supposed to be 18, she reads a lot younger, and her impulsiveness wore on me more than it charmed me. I also wish we'd gotten more time in Canton and Hong Kong. After such a long build-up, they kind of arrive as an afterthought. Erin Lynn's narration on the audiobook is excellent though. She handles all the varied voices and accents with real skill. For anyone who loves richly detailed maritime historical fiction with a feminist undercurrent, this is a satisfying voyage, even if the destination arrives a little too quickly. I was kind of struggling with setting up the spread for this book, to be honest, and so I used the scrapbooking paper that I had laying around from Stimperia to be kind of like the edges, and I used my distress ink to make it more vintagey looking. I also had some scrap sticker paper laying around, and so I just wrote the lettering for the title of the book in there. And this was my spread for the Stargazer of Nantucket. Not my favorite, but you can win them all. The next book I read is The Unicorn Hunters by Catherine Arden. Thank you so much to Del Rey Books for the physical arc. So let's start here. Catherine Arden's writing is beautiful. Her prose demands that you slow down and actually read it. Not skim it, not half listen while doing chores, but really sit with it and let the sentences do the work. The problem is that beautiful writing alone couldn't quite carry me through with this book. And I'm very sorry to say that. It was one of my most anticipated releases. I was really looking forward to it, and it was the most boring book I've ever read in my whole life. I genuinely do not understand how it has such high ratings on Goodreads. The Unicorn Hunters follows Anne of Brittany, a young sovereign facing an impossible situation: marry the King of France and surrender her country, or find another way out entirely. The political stakes are clear and compelling right from the start, and Arden handles the weight of Anne's position with real care. I spent the entire first half of this book fully invested in the court intrigue, the fragile alliances, and the question of whether Anne could outmaneuver everyone trying to claim her. But here's where I started to lose the thread. The magic takes a very long time to actually show up. A unicorn here, a strange nun there, a man with vague, ambiguous powers. For most of the first half, the story is so grounded in historical realism that when it takes a sharp turn at the midpoint into full-blown fantasy, like I'm talking shadow walking, evil sorceress, sea dragons, the Corrigan, it genuinely felt like I'd wandered into a completely different novel. The two halves never quite stitched together for me. The pacing didn't help either. Everything unfolds slowly, and that's not automatically a flaw in literary fantasy, but here it meant the characters started to feel more like passengers in their own story than the ones driving it. Honestly, that slowness bored me at times. It took me an entire month to finish this book, and I debated DNFing it more than once. There's also a romantic subplot that shows up feeling incomplete, almost like we'd skipped a chapter somewhere along the way. That said, I can absolutely see who's going to adore this book. Readers who love complex lyrical prose, deep historical texture, and that medieval fairy tale atmosphere layered over real political history. If that's you, this is probably a 5-star read. It just wasn't quite my book. The last book I read in May is The Burning Side by Sarah Damoff. Thank you so much to Simon Books for the arc. Okay, let's talk about that opening line because it sets the tone for absolutely everything that follows. The house burns down the same night Leo asks for a divorce. That's it. That's the sentence you're handed on page 1, and it's a kind of gut punch that tells you exactly what kind of ride you're in for. This is a character-driven novel, and I don't personally enjoy character-driven novels. I really like and need an actual plot, but somehow I didn't hate this book. What the entire book is built around is emotional archaeology, slowly digging through who these people are and how they got there. The story unfolds through 3 alternating perspectives, and each one adds a completely different layer. First, there's April, who carries the weight of motherhood and self-blame in equal measure, and you feel both of those things pressing on her constantly throughout the book. Then there's Leo, who was shaped by a lonely childhood, raised by relatives who never quite wanted him around, and that story explains so much about who he becomes as a husband and a father. And then there's Deb, April's mother, who is quietly navigating her own husband's Alzheimer's diagnosis while simultaneously trying to hold her daughter's crumbling marriage together. 3 completely different kinds of grief, all unfolding at the same time, under the same roof, essentially. The flashbacks to April and Leo's early relationship are some of the most effective parts of the entire book. Watching them fall in love, knowing exactly what's waiting for them down the road, creates this very particular kind of ache. You want to warn them, but you can't. You just have to watch it happen. What I appreciated most, though, is that Damoff doesn't let anyone off the hook completely, but she also never flattens anyone into being a villain. These characters are unlikable at times, genuinely frustrating at times, and that's the whole point. Real people are like that too. Nobody in this book is purely sympathetic or purely at fault, and that messiness is what makes it feel so true to life. I also have to mention how well the fire works as a structural metaphor running through the whole story. Damoff never makes a big fuss about it, never hits you over the head with it. It's just quietly there, holding everything together underneath the surface. But if I'm being honest, Deb's storyline is the one that gave me the most pause. Grief about aging and memory, sitting right alongside marital grief, is such a specific and layered kind of sadness, and Damov handles it with so much care and restraint. It might have been my favorite thread in the entire book. Now for the spread that I created for this one, I pulled out the same acrylic markers I used for Amina and Sirafi, and this time I based the whole design on the cover of the book because it's stunning and I knew I wanted to try recreating it. I trusted the process again the same way I did last time, but if I'm being completely honest with you, something about this one feels like it's missing a piece. I can't quite put my finger on what it is yet. I feel like I needed to do a better job at blending the colors, but I just don't love it. I'm still happy with how it all turned out though, just wasn't 100% my favorite. And that's a wrap on May, friends. 8 books, 1 incredible washi tape haul, a couple of new favorite spreads. Thank you so much for sitting with me through this one, especially since I know this was a longer video than usual. If you loved the setup, give it a like and let me know down in the comments which book from this month you're adding to your TBR. I always love hearing that. You can find me everywhere as PsychonautJournaling, that's Instagram, TikTok, and Bookstagram, so come say hi. And if you want even more of my reading journey, including deeper dives into some of these reads, you can find all of that over at my blog at PsychonautJournaling.com. Thank you so much for being here, happy reading, and happy journaling!